What's up, everybody? Blue Toshi here, and on my right is Disco.
Ahoy!
What a week, my God. Like we always say, like some week have news and some weeks don't. Disco this week had a lot of news, and it feels like there was a tectonic shift in reality this week. What do you think?
Right? It's just, I mean, I normally steer clear of, certain words, but holy shit. Like, I
Oh,
can't,
your first swear
I
in
mean,
our whole year.
I know, but it merits it. Like, we're just in such it's just, as I say, riveting times and a lot of ways to look at it. So I'm happy that we have this show to get into this week. So, welcome to everybody who's going to join us for sure.
Yep, absolutely, guys. So we have a lot to share today. We've got obviously everything going on from Trump, from assassination to speaking at Nashville next week. We got SAB overturned, denied. We got macro. We got Germany is out. F you, Germany, you idiots. I'm sorry, Saxony, the state of Saxony. We
Indeed.
got Larry Fink action. We got ETH chatter. Disco wanted me to look at CryptoPunks. I don't want to look at them, so F you for making me do that. But maybe
Sorry.
I got to see how the stuff's going and a whole lot more. So sit back, relax, and just know. Tell your friends about this. Just know that we are independent. We have no biases. We're not bought like most of the people in this business, and we actually tell it how we see it. So, like, subscribe, post comments. We do see the comments and we
Ooh.
do put you on the air, and we love answering questions on air. So, if you're watching, do all that stuff. Tell your friends.
Welcome to Decentral Lens, your weekly 30-minute crypto report with your hosts, Blue Toshi and Disco.
All right, Disco. Well, I think I hit the wrong one. So we had the short intro. That's probably the right intro to hit anyway, right?
Yeah, I
So
was starting to like lean back, and then I'm like, "Oh, we're back. Okay, nestle, let's go, bud."
you thought you had 17 seconds to sit back and relax while you did the intro, and that was like the 1.5 second one. So welcome everybody. Like I said, there's so much going on this week. I guess we just got to jump right in because how do you not talk about the elephant in the room? No pun intended. Trump was an attempted assassination on him from a very, very strange set of circumstances. Like, how could a sniper possibly be within 150 yards of him? It makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, it's stranger than I could have anticipated, and it's just I'm not going to be some genius here calling it, but it basically like the election's over, and we're starting to really see what the impact of what the new administration is going to do. So you're seeing just all these different reactions in so many different ways, and they're massive in terms of the scope and the wealth and the influence of people that are like adjusting accordingly to the new. I mean, I don't know, Polymarket's like 71 to 74%, but it's just, I couldn't believe that chain of events and how it went down. And there's so many different interesting angles to kind of dig into and to think about. So it's just a lot to consider for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it,
There it is.
there's some weeks where we, could do a show every day. This is one of those weeks, and there's some where we're like, maybe we do a show every other week because we want it all to build up, because we love weaving the threads together of all the stories, because everything in this world and all of us obviously are very tied together. So, for those who are watching, we've got the iconic image that was up after the assassination attempt within minutes of him getting hit in the ear and then going down, I guess putting his shoes on, then going back up and saying fight, fight, fight. But the Republicans right now are the obviously, with JD Vance too, the pro crypto party. I mean, every day more and more information comes out on that. So whether it's strategic calculations to get us, what was the number? You always know the number. Is it 20 million of us in America who, especially,
I think it was Yeah, no, it's like 48 million holders, and then X% are single issue voters. So it's a big enough voting block to tip the scales, and that certainly has been identified and motive or manipulated to kind of impact what's going to happen for sure. So they identified that there's a very vocal, wealthy, engaged electorate that was not being served by this, and it really just paved the way for these massive kind of ripples and changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fight that we've seen even since we started our podcast last fall, in the last year, where crypto's taking the fight on the offense. Like we saw it at first, like if you get pushed around enough and you get backed into a corner with no exit, which was what was happening with Yellen, Gensler, and Janet, or what's her name,
Yeah,
Elizabeth
but even
Warren.
James Diamond and all, what I mean? It was all across the board. It wasn't just, legislators or anything. It was, heads of the banks and, all that. And it was all, and what was that guy that was, that Menendez guy just got, busted for
Oh
bribery and
yeah,
accepting and everything. So it was just everything was against it. I'm going to take a different turn on this for a second.
yeah, do
And what's fascinating me so much about the assassination and about Trump, and I come from a background of being exposed to gun violence and the trauma related to it.
right,
And it's something, I had a life-changing thing happen to me in my formative years. And, I'm no spring chicken, and it's still something that, I deal with as these things happen. And when I see a shooting, it triggers my trauma and everything
right.
like that. I just don't understand how Trump can get up and play golf and move on and get going. Like he truly is built differently. Like there's something crazy that he's able to
Mm,
shrug off an assassination attempt, get out there, and then immediately when he's down, get up and figure out how to get that, priceless, iconic photo op in play. So it's just so fascinating to me how he's wired, that he's able to shrug off something going right by him, doesn't appear to have, deep kind of esoteric meaning of life sort of thoughts immediately after, but is instead able to figure out how to
right.
manipulate it and get some. So I don't even know where I'm going with that, but it's just such a
No,
fascinating thing to watch. It's like, how can someone just shake that off, be on the golf course at 9 a.m. the next day, go to another place where it's a high target opportunity, and he just rolls with it. So that to me is, and that's not political any side of it. It's just
yeah.
as a humanistic study, it's fascinating that can happen in that way.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many angles to this, but you're right. Like, if I got hit in the ear, I'd be down, and I'd be like, I think I'm gonna stay down. Like my life is too valuable. But the writing is definitely on the wall. I mean, obviously within crypto, we've seen just companies with enforcement and fines in the billions of dollars, and just getting kicked around with the SEC and with Elizabeth Warren, the anti-crypto army. Obviously, choke point 2.0. You brought up something interesting about Jamie Dimon. Like, he was piping in. You could tell those last couple times he did it, he was like, yes, Bitcoin is bad. Like it was almost like he had a
Yeah,
contract. He had like a 6 deal movie contract, and he was on a 6th movie.
yeah,
Like Jump Out of Airplane 6, the Revenge of the Revenge, and he, obviously with their other hand, they're working with like Ethereum blockchain heavily within their own organization, and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's interesting how the Democrats just effing blew this, and the Republicans have completely just said, we are the crypto party. You got JD Vance coming on now, right, as the VP.
right.
Actually grew up near where my dad grew up. So, Dad, I love you, rest in peace. But before he passed, he had told me about Hillbilly Elegy. I think I read it, but it was as far as I recall, it was a long time ago. But it's an interesting slice. And one interesting thing about JD Vance, obviously we know he holds, I thought it was between 100 and 250 grand in Bitcoin, but someone said it was actually 250K plus in Bitcoin, which is great. Like, I'm big fan if he holds it, like at the highest levels
Yeah,
of government. Like, that's, if you hold the bags, it's your incentive model changes quite differently. But Dr. G actually reached out to me. He's from Ohio, big swing state, and he actually pointed out something that I didn't know. So JD Vance also is a huge proponent of open source AI.
Really?
Yes, which that's huge, right? I mean, what we learned from Dr. G and just kind of delving deep into AI, I feel like crypto and AI more and more, you hear more and more shows like Peter McCormack, like people are bringing AI folks on because the confluence of them is clearly coming together. You look at
Right.
Noster and you look at some of these apps that, it's more of a decentralized social chain. You can see it happening in front of our eyes with payments and with so much, and the only way to really have AI where it can make money for you on its own is crypto. You obviously can't charge a credit card or use PayPal or Venmo, like those things blow, and shit, even they're in crypto. So I think that JD Vance point, it certainly helped between the assassination attempt and announcing JD Vance. What's the poly market number? I think it went up to 71%.
Yeah,
It
that's
went
what
up
I saw.
big time. Here, let's take a look. Let's see. There we go. So the presidential election winner, yeah, he's up to, I think it even went up to 71. So it actually went back, but Biden's at 18%. I mean,
Dude, 18%. And I don't know, they're going to ride with Biden. You know what I mean? And it's like there was opportunities for them to pivot and it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So, it just feels like it's odd because it almost feels like we're in like a post-election, session. And it's just, it's fascinating it's almost like we fast forwarded, we know the answer, and now you can kind of position yourself accordingly.
yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people are doing that. So you've got the
Yeah.
Republic. So to recap, obviously Donald Trump is speaking at Bitcoin Nashville next. The 27th, I believe, is Friday or Saturday. So it's not the first couple of days. I think it's the last day. So he's speaking
Okay.
at Bitcoin Nashville. He's got JD Vance, who's not only into open source AI, which I think is just as important as crypto and holding your own private keys. So that's a double win. And they're already announcing. Trump announced this morning that America, it's always America first, which is great, but we have to beat China in the crypto race. So, that's for our industry, that's a lot of stars lining up, and it just makes you wonder if the Bitcoin standard, which was obviously invented and made genius by Michael Saylor MicroStrategy, if companies will start hedging, thinking he at this point is looking likely to win, and they'll start adopting the Bitcoin standard, aka putting more and more of their treasury into Bitcoin instead of US dollars.
That's a fascinating notion because we've seen, it's always, you see so much, cash on the balance sheet and all that stuff. And it's like, we see that some of those companies where they're just maximizing the potential upside and seeing it. And, you go back to the basics, right? You go back to the fixed supply, you go back to scarcity and everything like that. And it almost becomes like you're fiduciary if you're not going to allocate towards that. Like you're missing an opportunity, you're not benefiting, your shareholders. So, just tiny amounts of these large companies, if they, position in there, will have significant, impact on, us as retail guys. And it'll just be really interesting to see.
Well, 100%. And I did a tweet the other day, and I'm getting
Ooh.
more inspired in research and stuff. So there are 13 companies, 13, most of them obviously tech companies, a couple oil companies in there, that hold $1 trillion in cash. So obviously that's Apple at like 165 billion. I think Microsoft is right behind them at like 130 billion. But that's cash. That's not like the revenue that comes in tomorrow. That's the cash that is literally just sitting somewhere as their war chest. I mean, can you imagine if they just started nibbling like a couple billion each of them at a time? I mean, BlackRock's at 18 to 20 billion. That whole right. It's like it
It's
adds up.
so it's unbelievable.
It adds up fast. Yeah. So the total net of inflows, and that obviously counts the GPTC 18 billion outflows, the net up is 16 billion right there. So Apple, Google, can you imagine if they just each put in 3 or 4% or something? Like, to me, if I was an employee of Apple, if they had some, Tim Cook, hey, here's the I'm on stage, here's the suggestion box, they'd be like, yeah, Tim over here, like Blutoshi and sub vice president assistant of accounting for the iPod Touch. When are you going to use the Bitcoin standard? Be like, you'd figure a tech company before anybody would be all over this. And at least, I'm not saying put in all your treasure, which like if I took over Apple today as CEO,
Not financial advice.
yeah, not at all. Well, what are they going to sue me for giving Apple advice and then they take it? Be like, well, it is Blutoshi's fault. He did have that podcast and he did say we should do this, so it's his fault because
seismic shift.
Seismic shift happened, but. If I came in as CEO of Apple, which I'm kind of petitioning to do now, and I will take a salary of only $10 million a year in a
here.
$2.5 trillion company, that seems fair, right? $10 million a year. And the first thing I would do is put them on the Bitcoin standard. I'd go all in because think about it. If you're the first of one of these corporate juggernauts, and let's say they just put like 40 billion in, they were before Google, Meta, Nvidia, and all these cash cows, and they just put in like 40 billion over, I don't know, 8 or 9 months. Like at some point, then you announce it, everyone's going to copy you. And right there, I've just been more profitable for you for the next like 5 to 10 years on your treasury that doesn't have to do anything, and that's the Michael Saylor way. That's why the guy's a genius. And that's why with these new accounting principles, I can't believe with the seismic shift that happened this week that companies aren't doing it. And maybe they are, and maybe we'll hear about it in the next quarterly results. But like Google, Apple, all of you listening to this podcast, all you CEOs out there, like get on the Bitcoin standard, or at least start to nibble. It's legal. The IRS rules, like you can do it in your treasury now. It's not counted as a liability. Like do it. Like what are you waiting for?
Yeah, it's on. And you bring up that point, and you brought up earlier, somebody kind of got in, somebody got to Trump about like a competitive field day sort of thing against China. Like, oh, it's a race. Let's see how we do that. So you'll have the nations kind of going, you'll have the companies going. So again, you go back to 21 million and the whole thing. It appears to be so evident and obvious. And you're right. I would be surprised if it's not happening, underneath the hood a little bit for sure.
Yeah. So we'll see. So that Trump conversation spurs a lot of different elements, but
yeah,
there's gotta be with different organizations, a hedge play going on here, and knowing that it's going that way. And even if they didn't win the presidency or the House and the Senate, I mean, they're probably aligned to win all three. There's such a strong force now of fighters that we're not going to stop, it's way more organized. We know when to call our senators and Congress people. Like it's not going to stop. I still think companies, even if you're not hedging, like just do it, get involved. So
yeah, it appears to be a best practice, right? Like it seems so obvious. So it's just, again, just taking a step back and looking at all this, right? It's like, so you have that side of it. You have, all the lobbying. There was some stuff that came out this week that I was looking at where, it is behind the numbers, like actually that's just for donations to lobbying was like close to $80 million in the past 2 years, which is up like, well over 1,000%. And it just leads to this question of, are we entering a phase where there's transparency on what has probably been happening forever, but with like this total pay to play environment, it seems to feel like, so you have, the guy Gemini, like, so you always see the Winklevosses are contributing to this super PAC or that, and it really is like, are we paying or putting like placards in place for positions or authority in this new kind of world order that we're seeing? And I know that sounds really drastic with a new world order, but we are looking at a completely new environment. And I think of it this way, like I saw something on this a while ago or maybe yesterday about, have we legitimized what were kind of vices before because we can do them on our phones or do this or that. You saw like gambling, you used to have to like jump through hoops to find a bookie to do this or that, and now you can like ping it on your phone, or all these sort of things have just become kind of normalized. You look at cannabis and all these things that weren't there are
Yeah.
now, some of these vices are now normalized and accepted. And when we look at people contributing significant dollars, it's for influence over how things are decided and how policies made. And it's just really kind of fascinating to see how transparent it is now, because you're seeing, oh, Elon may donate this much or this much might happen. So you're seeing people really kind of organizing the seats at the next dinner table, and I don't feel like it's ever been that public before. So it's just kind of interesting to reflect on that.
Yeah, no, that's a nice deep thought. I think it is pay to play. I think it has been for decades. Like, the more we look back, the more I think it has gotten worse and worse and worse over the years. I mean, the best example of a TV show that just kind of wakes you up to how things really work was The Wire, when Stringer Bell is paying off that politician to, I think, start building like not high rises, but like tenement buildings and stuff like that. And then he gives the guy the money, and the guy's like, hey, it takes time, like you gotta keep feeding me. I mean, it was such a great, I think that was season 4. But yeah, it is pay to play, and it sucks. And I guess when you're quote unquote the biggest capitalist society, that's how it works. I just wonder if the Chevron deference could change that, because you don't have this swinging door going from these guys who leave the SEC and who right now obviously are going into crypto. They're going into the space where they could probably make the most money and probably the most impact by going and talking to the people that they used to sit next to on the regulation side. So hopefully that revolving door calms down, but I guess I'm not naive to think that the graft and the take in DC is gonna magically just all of a sudden get better. I guess, as Trump says, like draining the swamp. I hope it does, but I don't know. The one stat I heard is that Silicon Valley, as you would expect, had the most millionaires like 10, 15 years ago, but now it is decidedly Washington, D.C. And you just wonder, like,
Really?
who's generating value in D.C.? Well, the lobbyists are generating money for themselves. Like, so it's just like you said, I think that stat alone kind of tells you everything you need to know. Like, where is the money? And so all this taxpayer money we have, all this lobbying money, it just sloshes around there, and it's creating a lot of very wealthy people in DC.
Yeah, I guess they call the people who go from the public sector to lobbying, they call them revolvers. So there's like a percent of, people, and it's kind of the career path, right? Like you're going to go in and do that, and then, get a nice little parachute to exert your influence for, whoever hires you, essentially.
Right.
So it's remarkable that, crypto has really, it just, if you look at it from a 9-month to 12-month perspective, we were talking about how the election was going to change everything and how we were going to see the macro impact, but seeing it really manifest when we're only 3 months away, it's just fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got Dragon say, I got to change fonts, but Dragon, appreciate your comment. He says Bitcoin would be an amazing employee benefit for retention and recruiting talent too. Absolutely. I mean, think about, I mean, you would be getting cutting edge people there for sure, right? Like if I worked
Yeah.
for a company, I used to work for a big entertainment company back in the day. Like they used to be one of the coolest companies on the planet and have become, I would argue, fairly irrelevant, to say the least. Right. And that's just, that's
Can
what happens.
confirm.
Yeah. I mean, 10, 20 years, that's the kind of stuff that happened. But if it was some mid-sized company and they're like, oh, by the way, we also have like a match. It can either be in Bitcoin or this. Some employees would be like, yeah, I don't care. But some would be like, they get it. I'm in, because they're going to be more likely to probably make the right decisions about the future of their business. I remember one of the reasons I left my big entertainment corporate job was because this was right when the iPod came out, and the iPod was, if you think the iPhone was groundbreaking, the iPod is what kicked it all off. And our company, like I said, the coolest company of that era, did a deal with like Microsoft Real Player. And if you don't know what that is, don't worry, it's as lame as it sounds. Like they've, and I'm like, you guys completely picked the wrong company. You're picking the established juggernaut in tech. You're not picking the one who's about to go meteoric. And it did.
Wow. That's an interesting, yeah, I don't even remember that Microsoft offshoot or whatever it was.
Why would you?
So, yeah, so going back to just, the politics side of it, we also saw, interestingly enough, Ripple, got behind and made $1 million donation to John Deaton's campaign against Elizabeth Warren. So really starting to see that. I know Deaton had background with Ripple and XRP, like supporting that from a legal perspective. So it's interesting that they came back and donated to him. And it just makes you think, like, when we first talked about Deaton and Warren, it was like, oh, there's no way. Like, she's one of the most embedded incumbents, and there's no chance that we're going to see a shift, and see an upset there. But if people this close to election day are donating $1 million, like, they're not doing that because they don't think there's a good chance or a possibility that could actually happen, and we could see, her unseated. So seeing that come to life was really, really kind of interesting, and made me start paying more attention to the numbers in that race and think about that for sure.
I think if she lost, and then let's move on for political, but if she lost, that would be like, everything else aside, because like I still like RFK. He was the first Bitcoin candidate. I love his stuff on vaxxes. Like there's I don't agree with everything he says, but there's a lot I do agree with what he says. But I think we can all agree Elizabeth Warren absolutely has to go. I don't know how long she's been a senator. Probably this will be her third or fourth term, but like, see ya, time to go. Like congratulations on being worth what, like $70 million now. Like, it's time for you to go. And the fights you're fighting, the biggest aha for me, and the biggest patch of irony this year, is when we reported that they wrote this whole anti-crypto, I don't know, it wasn't the Choke Point 2.0 thing, but they wrote this whole thing, and it was like, and thanks to the banking consortium who helped us write it. Like, and Elizabeth Warren, for those who are younger, 20 years ago, she was like anti-banks and anti like the cabal of the banks and the monopoly that they had on money, and she's just full of crap. So if Deaton beat her, that would be absolutely a bow tied for certainly our industry, and it would show you, like, go against crypto and you will lose. Like, that would be such a seismic shift. Nobody would go against it anymore. And the beauty is, once we have that firm footing there and people like her have been rooted out, we can fight the higher level fights, like, making sure, I know it's on the Republican platform, but holding your own private keys, always being able to do that. That to me is just like when they tried to steal gold in the 1930s, like and they ended up not doing it because it became wildly unpopular because of one guy who stood up, and then it kind of caused a ripple effect because he was kind of like, you're not taking my gold, I dare you. And they didn't. And that allowed, I think 30% of the people handed theirs in. The other 70% were like, I'm good. Like, I'm gonna keep quiet and ride this one out. Yeah. So this one, that one's a huge fight. And I think open source AI, where, if anyone's been playing around with ChatGPT or Anthropic, like, you'll notice, especially around the election, that you're not able to reproduce images of your two potential presidents, and you're not even allowed to ask questions. It'll just be like, yep, I can't even answer that. So already the censorship crackdown has started happening there. And, I don't need to be told how to think. I want AI, which basically just scours everything. I want the truth, and I want to find the answers that I want to find. And open source AI is really the only way to do that. I love Venice.ai. That's the one I've been using, and a lot of these pictures we're using on the show disc are Venice. So hats off to them for doing that. In fact, let's transition, because I think the next one, let's see, is the next one. Yeah, so that's that
There we
flag
go.
one. Yeah, that's a Venice picture. All right, so let's transition because it ties
Yeah.
right in to what's going on with the macro market. So Germany, like, see ya.
I know. And just a quick shout out to Spain and Argentina for winning their respective cups. I wish I could have seen the two of them compete against each other, but I guess we'll have to wait for the World Cup. But remember when everyone was rooting against Germany, in the right in the middle of the dump. So sorry, that just triggered a little soccer or football talk.
No,
Sorry.
for sure. I honestly, I don't think Argentina, because Messi's not as good as he used to be. In fact, that striker who came in at the end, who was a part of helping score the goal, was, Messi's just getting older. I don't think Argentina would have a chance against Spain. Maybe England, because England's born to watch. I'm sure any Europeans will just start cursing me for that, but I don't think Spain was beatable this year. They were just so good all around.
Yeah, it was fun to watch, and it's fun to watch kind of the youth come around on there. So yeah, it's kind of time for a little bit of a shifting of the power structure in that sport for sure. But yeah, so Germany's done, and then everyone's like, oh, Mount Gox, and you know what? It's getting eaten up. It's just like Pac-Man, It's like those what do they call them in Pac-Man? I forget, but those are being just gobbled up by the ETFs essentially.
The dots are getting
Yeah.
eaten up, Disco. I think that it was so
Yeah, but
in an 8-bit game, you can't call it any more than a dot. Maybe there are power, and then there's like the little power, the 4 power balls in the corners, but I don't even know what those are called. But Germany is officially out. So that was just under 50,000 Bitcoin. I think that adds up to $3 or $4 billion, but it was 50,000 Bitcoin. To put it in perspective, MicroStrategy has 226,000 Bitcoin. So about, okay, 1/4 to 1/5 of what they had. It was a lot of Bitcoin, and that the FUD happened. Then they sold within 4 or 5 days. Some of it came back, and it's funny now that they're empty. People have been sending like $4 in Bitcoin. You're big Germany here, have your Bitcoin, and give them like $4.
With like FU messages and stuff too.
Yeah. So they're sold 100%, right? Which is crazy that the market could absorb 50,000 Bitcoin like within a week. So Mount Gox has not, that they have actually not, 47,000, about a third was distributed to Kraken, but I do not believe Kraken has 14 days, so a very short window, but they still have time to distribute to their holders.
Okay.
So it's out of the, so it's out of the, here, I've got a great chart for this, but it's out of the Mount Gox wallet, and it's not centered very well, but here's Mount Gox, and the current holdings are 90K. It was 142K. If you scroll here, just look above Disco's head, and for those of you who are watching, it's right. Where's the big one? It's like right. It's right under you. But so 47,000 went out. Arkham, who does a great job, and they track Germany really well, and now they're tracking the Mount Gox coins. It is believed to have gone to Kraken. I believe Kraken did confirm that they had received it. I know Disco gets very nervous, and he always sends himself, like when he changes wallets, like 0.001 Bitcoin first. I wonder.
I'm a big test guy.
Yeah, I wonder if there's testers there, be like, and typo, and gone forever, because it's estimated that 10% of the Bitcoin, right now, I think we have 19.47 million, but I believe the guess is around 10% is lost. It's in a laptop at the bottom of a trash heap somewhere that the guy can't get to, but the guesstimate, I believe, was 10%. So there's 1.97 million Bitcoin right there. So it's crazy. So we will see. My this is not financial advice, Disco, but I've been nibbling a little more in the last couple weeks. I didn't get right in when the FUD peaked. I kind of bought a little before in the 60s, but it's obviously already back. I think mid 60s now for Bitcoin. But I'm really waiting to see. Remember, 76% of the Mount Gox stuff was already whales came in, or companies, and said, we'll give you 11% of the receipts due, years ago. And a lot of people were like, fine, I don't believe this is ever going to happen. And
That's right.
now these people who gave these, took the IOUs there, are going to just make a windfall. So are they going to keep it? Or are they going to sell it? A little combination of both. It's going to be really interesting to see. I'm hoping there's one more dip, that not from Mt. Gox FUD, but finally after 10 years from actually the Mt. Gox selling. I hope there's a little dip. I'm definitely personally going to nibble in and stack as many sats as I can, because I just, after that, with all this momentum going into the summer, going into the fall, with the presidential race, with even the Democrats, like, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth, but obviously their stance has way lessened. Like, I just, and generally after having the peak of Bitcoin in every cycle, is it 7 months? I thought it was like between like 12 and most people are saying like at some point in 20, like they're saying late 2025, that'd be 18 months, but maybe it's a little before that, but it doesn't happen right away is the point. So all these things, all these confluences, and then with the treasury stuff happening and allowing corporations to get it, like at some point, Fidelity and iBit and all these, they're just going to get more and more and more from retail and from corporations and possibly state actors. So I think it's going to rip.
Yeah. So you see, we were talking about all of Germany and how that, or Saxony or whatever it was, right? And that would have been offset by one corporation doing what you outlined earlier. That allocation would be just the 3 billion or whatever it is. That could just be like if one of those companies decided to buy. So when we start seeing that and you see the price recover off of those not necessarily even being live factors right now, it seems so inevitable, and it feels as if FOMO on this front has been legitimized. Like, it used to be like, oh, am I just manipulating myself into this FOMO? But now it's like, no, it's now like due diligence. Like, it's like there's an anchor of reality to the FOMO, which it's just kind of an interesting phase to be in. It's like, dude, grab more. I actually talked to my accountant yesterday, and I think this may be tied to Larry Fink a bit, but they're talking about digital assets like crazy now. They're like, well, with your digital assets and how those are only going to be expanding their role. I'm like, and they're like trying to tell me, they're like, look at it like this. I'm like, I haven't been in this space forever, but I know more than you about this. Like, simmer down. Don't like give me the 101 on, well, you have to offset your stuff. And the one thing they did say that kind of scared me, the one thing that scared me though, was they're like, you better make sure you're really, really buttoned up, because AI from an IRS and governmental perspective will really supercharge their ability to, kind of crunch numbers and track things. So just a word of advice for folks to think that, they're never going to figure this out. I think that they're going to, get pretty advanced by utilizing some of these tools as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Be careful out there. And if you make money, yeah, I mean, you can try, but I'll always pay my pound of flesh to, whether I agree with all the pound of flesh I have to give or not is another story. But yeah, definitely be careful out there, because the tools are getting more advanced from every step of the way. And it's interesting, like that 3 billion number that you mentioned, that's basically, just inflows. That's like 1 month of ETFs, right? So that can be gobbled up quite quickly. Now, like I said, Mt. Gox, that one's going to be interesting, and I'm hoping there's a little bit of sell-off, because after that, like, that Mt. Gox FUD, I've been in it since 2015, and the Mt. Gox FUD's been going on, if not 2015, shortly thereafter, so almost a decade, that they've been talking about, like, oh, when that dumps, like, Bitcoin's tank and never coming back. Well, we know it will come back, but I'd love to see it go down, because there's nothing better when there's a dip and why there's a dip, and it actually is selling, because if you don't know why and you're like, oh God, are there insiders who know that some regulation is going to come down and keep Americans from doing X, Y, or Z? No, this one we know. So I'm hoping we hit the 40s or 50s one more time. I know, careful what you wish for, because it'll be terrifying when it happens, but if it does, I'm in.
It's as if you were a fly in the wall of my kitchen over the weekend when I was adamantly telling my better half that this is a perfect opportunity because it's Germany's fault and it's not Bitcoin's fault. And if we don't figure out a way to get a little bit more, we're going to be kicking ourselves next week because it'll open up. And I also knew this was
And
interesting.
it
I knew
did.
over the weekend. Yeah. And I knew over the weekend that we were going to see some positive stuff because I knew that Larry Fink was going to do the CNBC rounds Monday morning because they were doing their earnings. And sure as sure as can be, he was out there Monday morning, preaching to the tradfi masses, that he was, quote, wrong about Bitcoin and has changed his tune. And I don't think that, you talk about influencers and you talk about this or that, but you have a gentleman in the position of Mr. Fink go on there and be very bullish on Bitcoin. That really, kind of settles the feathers and settles the pillow and tucks people in a little bit more about making allocations in their stuff. It's like, well, Fink says it's
Settles the
okay.
feathers. I
Yes.
love it. Yeah, no,
So
but you're right. And you and I were joking in the pre-show yesterday, like there's influencers in our space, there's the runes influencers and the pure degen, and then ordinals influencers, and then Bitcoin
yeah,
influencers. He is the
money.
influencer, yeah, hedge fund, Wall Street, like, people are on the Squawk Box. He's on Squawk Box with who's that guy, Kramer? What a dipshit
Yeah,
that
yeah,
guy is. But he's on there, Kramer. Do you see him defer? He's like, "Oh, Larry Fink, you're the greatest." Like, it was just such a,
it's so
we know the friend
embarrassing.
we knew growing up. I would impersonate him and say his name, but that would just be cruel. But he was just total bootlicker on Larry Fink. But Larry Fink is basically, I mean, think about he didn't mince those words. Like, the fact that he's like, I made a mistake, like, he thought what he was going to say, because like big guys like that don't generally admit they're wrong much, but he didn't do it because he's like, hey, I got to own up to the world. He did it because he knew when you're trying to convince the normies and the masses of something, you basically say like, oh yeah, this is how I used to think, but I've like you normies, you morons over there. But now that I went down the rabbit hole and I've been doing it and I've been learning more and more. And oh, by the way, I have now, because of Bitcoin, 10 trillion assets under management at BlackRock. So, I mean, in 6 months, they have reaped more benefits. It's just
Yep.
amazing, but more than anybody else. 10.6 trillion under management. Bitcoin they added 51 billion in Q2, and IBIT now has $21 billion in it. So, is
Yeah.
Bitcoin the only game in their the only arrow in their quiver? No, but it is a big one, and it's the fastest growing ETF of all time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, and he is the spearhead of that, and he's bringing it to the normies for us.
And looking, like, it's fascinating. You look at the actual, quarterly report, and they are crediting ETF inflows for their beating the street and beating expectations. So, we talk about copycats and things like that. Like, when other companies start seeing, wow, they're actually generating significant inflows and revenue that's helping their bottom line, then something becomes legitimate. And it does beg the question, right, of how much influence did Mr. Fink have with Ethereum and the turnaround on the Ethereum ETF? Because, from being in sales in your background, right? Like, you're only as good as your last quarter, and you have a big quarter and you got to like match that the following
Right.
year. So you're going to want to add more fuel to the, kind of crypto ETF fodder and have another offering. So that's kind of the rumor now, is that as soon as next Tuesday, the Ethereum ETF will be actually tradable. So I don't expect anything along the lines of, the inflows that we've seen here, but even the percent that's kind of being speculated at is a significant jump up. So just the momentum train is just freaking rolling on these big picture things.
Yeah, and people are predicting that billions will inflow there as well. Obviously, the good news is we
Yeah.
don't have the problem we had in Bitcoin where a ton will then flow out of Grayscale. I know they have one, but I don't think the fees, like it's not as big of a market. So hopefully it's all net upside. I guess I'm still, I hold way more Bitcoin than ETH, but I still hold some ETH, and I'm I'm really curious to see how the price will move because unlike Bitcoin, that's still adding. What are we? 400 Bitcoin a day, right? After the halving, we were 800. Now we're 400. With Ethereum, sometimes it's actually deflationary. I think right now because it's not being used quite as much, it's slightly inflationary, but it's still below like 1% inflation. So we'll almost just call that flat. And for people like me who stake, I'm like, well, I'm still getting, staking rewards now because I think everyone and their mother is starting to stake now. It's like 2.5%, 3%, but it's still like 2.5%, 3% of an asset that I know is, if not deflationary, pretty damn close to deflationary. And if it really gets adopted, it's going to be way more deflationary. So, but I don't know why, but I'm cautiously optimistic on that one because I'm probably not going to buy a ton in the ETH ETF, but maybe I'll have to make a closer look at it. I don't know. Are you thinking of buying in on the ETF too?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no, and so I have the kind of my cycle perspective, right? So I haven't been a part of, I got in with Bitcoin at 100 or 10,000 or anything like that. Like I got in on Ethereum at about 4,500 when the all-time high is 4,700, right? And you see Ethereum now, maybe 3,300, 3,400 in that range. And it's like, it hasn't seen, from my perspective, that, hyper percentage increase. And so I want to get one of those. And the same thing goes with Solana. Like I do want to increase my exposure to Solana because we're still sitting like $100 under that all-time high, but it feels to me like that's going to get just, pony sticked over. Like we're just going to jump right past that. And I want to be a part of one of those that really kind of goes up and be a part of kind of a zero to a hero on one of these tokens. So I definitely want to have exposure to Ethereum in any way I can. Again, I said, I talked to my accountant yesterday. They're very excited about the ETFs and they're very excited about, the retirement fund opportunities that they present. So when I zoom out and think of it from that way, it's like, dude, there's no way I'm not going to have, a little, what am I going to do? Keep more, NVIDIA? Like you've got to diversify out of some of that stuff.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You keep bringing up this meeting with your accountant, and I almost feel like it's this watershed moment. Like we're like, are the normies coming? Because we always based it around the Thanksgiving table, but now like we're going out. We still have to do normie things in this world, like talk to our accountants and go to banks and stuff and pay bills and pay mortgages and stuff. But now that they're coming to you with a pitch, which is just so funny, you're like, you know what? Save the pitch or I'll give you feedback on your pitch, but don't be pitching me digital assets. I love that they're called like digital assets is such a palatable word, right? Like it's such a corporate palatable word. You'd be like, dude, save that. But that is showing us in real time that, if we're on like a ski slope and we're like those old school skiers who they don't believe in chairlifts, like when we were out in Sun Valley, they literally will be like, I did one run today. Be like, why only one? Because I walked up the mountain myself in my, those leather things you put at the bottom of skis. But my point is, in that chasm that all business school nerds learn, we are literally climbing up the hill. We have been trudging for so long, and now we are crossing that chasm, and normies are now hitting you up and me up and everybody watching this in this space up for digital assets. Like if that doesn't say the chasm has been crossed, I don't know what does.
Yeah, great. You're right. It was total watershed because I'm sitting there like, I'm like, wait, are you selling me? Because there's significant upside and you just want to make sure that, from a tax perspective on your massive gains, I'm like, what are you saying? I'm like, thank you. Finally, and I'm like, I'll let you know. Thanks for the tip.
What was their pitch? Was it like Because you're saying
No,
there's all
I
these
no,
tax
I
benefits.
No, what I did is I did a check-in because I had a little Mr. Scary about like, am I keeping track of my stuff the right, well enough? And, I think it's
Right.
such a daunting task these days. So I was like trying to just be like, hey, this is where I'm at on some of this stuff. Basic questions. How far can I go back? Can I claim Luna as a loss? Can I carry it forward? All that sort of stuff. And I had to just position it like I have some questions concerning my digital asset allocation. And she just ran with digital assets and just like they just came back from a conference or something. You could tell where it's like, no, we need to be, if we don't sound like we're up to date and understand this, then we're going to look irrelevant. So you have these different professions
I love
within the
it.
financial structure, having to teach themselves up or learn themselves up to be in order to maintain relevance, especially with the younger demographic, because it's like if you're an accountant and you're not able to speak to it, then you're going to certainly lose a lot of relevance. So it was a fascinating turning point for sure.
We have arrived. The only thing that hasn't arrived yet is the skyrocketing of Bitcoin and to your point, Ethereum. Like the fact that Bitcoin hasn't reached 100 grand yet. But maybe the Mt. Gox FUD was enough, and maybe there's always going to be this delay. But at some point, um, I actually checked last week. I wish I had it up here, but remember how we always used to check the amount of Bitcoin on the exchanges? It's
Yeah.
way less now. It's way.
Really?
Yeah, of course, right? So
Yeah.
like every week we do it and it change, like it go up and down a little depending on the FUD. And the bull, obviously it went up like at the beginning of this year, 2024, but it's so much more has been pulled off there. I mean, speaking of Larry Fink, do you know how much Bitcoin they have under management?
No.
322,000 Bitcoin.
Shut up, really?
So yeah, so that and tell me if I'm repeating myself. I feel like I did this at the beginning of the show, but I don't think I did. That is more Bitcoin than the Mt. Gox recovery, 147 or whatever. What Germany just got rid of, 50, Galaxy, which is 17.5, Marathon Holdings, which is the biggest miner in the world, Tesla, who has 10,000, Coinbase, who has 9,000, El Salvador, who has 6,000, and the UK, who has, I think, 60,000 combined.
They just gobbled it, man.
Yeah. So put it in perspective. So we've got IBIT that's got 322,000. So one could then figure, I think Fidelity is just about half. So they're probably at about 160,000. You got MicroStrategy at 226,000. So IBIT's crushed them.
Right.
But MicroStrategy is a company who holds it themselves, and IBIT obviously holds it for us, right? So kind of on behalf of us. China has 190,000. The US has 210,000. So they have more. BlackRock, that $10 trillion asset manager, has more than anybody else. And then I already told you which ones combined. Like it's a lot. And it's only, remember 6 months ago, they had zero.
That's what's
It's zero.
it's just so rapid and it's so like it just got absorbed. Like they just absorbed it, and what's their job? To make money, right? So they understand that it's a wise, asset and a wise investment. Just something that I saw that I don't know why I thought this was so interesting, but it kind of speaks to the, adoption going on around the country, but it was interesting. The city of Santa Monica, their city council unanimously approved a Santa Monica Bitcoin office. And part of their rationalization was that they've seen kind of a downturn since the pandemic just in, the city revenue and things like that. And they're like, we would like to associate ourselves with Bitcoin and being very Bitcoin friendly. And the vice mayor that proposed it actually went down and spent time studying El Salvador and came back with some kind of practices there. So again, just another unique example of that really being breaking through. When you have a city council, that's hard to get unanimous approval for anything, right? And they went 7-0 in favor of, starting a pilot program with the Santa Monica Bitcoin office. So when we start seeing municipalities be, hey, we're the, we saw it with the political parties, but now we're going to see it, almost luring, residents or businesses to, stake their claim in these different markets. Like that's a real significant transition as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And another one, just in terms of adoption, is that Russia is now looking to add crypto to its exchanges. So it's funny because there's two little, like there's the angel and devil on my shoulder. Part of me is like, is this like the I mean, obviously Putin's not in the Davos crowd, but is like this the global elite, like all being like, fine, we're in a Bitcoin, let's try and control it by just owning it all? Or is it like it is literally an arms race now to hold Bitcoin and other crypto and to make sure you do not fall behind? Because with all this global adoption, it does not, well, I was going to say it doesn't bode well for the US dollar because you have a true off ramp. But if the US dollar is the number one stable coin or the current global reserve currency, if they play it right and if US government maybe has enough Bitcoin, that might be the way to have the softest landing. I mean, can you imagine if the US government, I mean, we just said they have 210,000 Bitcoin for the biggest, most powerful country in the world. That's, I mean, let's be honest, that's nothing, right? Like you'd think they'd have, because remember 322,000 Bitcoin for BlackRock, that's 1.5% of the total supply that is mined or will ever be mined. That's 1.5%. So that's just what, under 1%. Oh no, I'm sorry. So the United States owns 1%. They would be ridiculously foolish to get rid of it. That's why Germany was so stupid as for national security to get rid of that Bitcoin, and that's why we're all making fun of them. But it's opening up, and the floodgates are opening. Another fact I heard, I'm going to get it wrong, but it ties everything back to the individual, because we're talking state actors and the most powerful countries in the world. I think there's like 20 or 30 million millionaires in the world. Like being a millionaire obviously isn't a big deal as it was in the 70s. Well, there's 21 million Bitcoin. So let's just say that's a 1-to-1. Like at some point, if every millionaire, that doesn't even count companies or anything like that. Like the math just like, it makes you realize like, well, if you're a millionaire or an entity worth way more, again, what are you doing? Why aren't you holding at least one? Like you're a fool. I think this could be the biggest transfer of wealth that possibly humanity has ever seen to a new kind of class of people.
And the development of a completely new asset, like that I mean, you didn't just discover gold, you know what I mean? But it's like, this has been created and it's now legitimized, and I just don't see a limit to where it's going to go and to the desire to possess it. You know what I mean? From what you're saying. Yep. And looking at, it's like, that's piddlywinks amounts for the US to have. Like, what are you doing? Like, gobble it up. Like you're going to regret it. It makes no sense, guys.
I love that t-shirt. I just looked it up while you were talking. It's 59 million millionaires. I'm sure with inflation, that number actually, I'll bet it was 21 million like 4 or 5 years ago. So basically that's a 3x from what I just said, right? So that puts even more pressure. So if you're a millionaire or more, again, what, like put 1% or 2% or 3%, but it sounds like you're saying the normies just approached you about digital assets. And I wish you had been like, give me the forms, give me the, show me the brochures. Will you show me your pitch deck? Like that'd be something like here and here's a digital asset. How you can, how it goes up when demand goes up. And there's only 21 million. And then you'd be
Yeah.
like, well, Ethereum, is it deflationary, or like just start asking him harder and
I know,
harder
just be
questions.
a total smartass. Like it'd be so fun. But I just wanted to get off the phone because I was like, this is fascinating to me. But yeah, it's going down. It's just so interesting to see happen. And I know they had like some caveat in the Russia proposal or whatever to limit the circle of qualified investors to.
Yeah.
So that's like, okay, you mean really important people in
Important and rich. Yeah. It's a
yeah,
high bar, because an accredited investor in America, I believe you have to have net worth of 1 million.
right,
And maybe a certain salary, but I think if you hit the net worth of 1 million, you're fine. Whereas it's probably higher, but I assume they want to use the collective, obviously with all the sanctions they have against them. Like, I'm shocked haven't been doing this for years, but maybe now it's just, they have been,
right.
the mucky mucks have, and now it's going down the chain. I mean, it just
So
seems like state actors, like, I mean, if they get involved, like, oh my God, like you have different size. You're like, wow, look at MicroStrategy. That's a whale. Oh, look at Michael Dell. That's an even bigger whale. Look at Apple. That's an even bigger whale, and then state actors are just like, with their gold and their warplanes, and like they can print money to buy, and you could deflate your currency to just buy more and more Bitcoin. You're probably
yeah.
not benefiting your people, but it's slowly,
When you
suddenly, all at once.
when you say, you think it could represent like the biggest wealth transfer, or that shift, do you think that it still has that element of bringing people up, or do you think it's going to just be the haves are just going to have this too? You know what I mean? Because there was always kind of this democratization movement thought of like, oh, well, everyone can get involved and this is, everyone can hold it. But it kind of feels a little bit like you better hurry up, like, so really the FOMO for a retail or someone trying to, ladder up their socioeconomic status by being involved in this, like that window really is shutting quickly, right?
Well, but is it though? Because think about it. Was it Lynn Alden? Someone made a really good point. When the demand for Bitcoin goes up and people buy Bitcoin, like,
Mm-hmm.
the price doesn't, because there's a limited supply, the price doesn't go up linearly. It goes up exponentially, because you're just taking that much more off. So as long as you can beat the masses in, you will catch the next run. I think there's going to be, in these next couple halvings in the next 8 to 12 years, there's going to be, some people are predicting 150 peak at this cycle. I think the consensus really more is in the 300,000 range, but you've got Fidelity and some of these guys predicting $1 million Bitcoin by 2030. And I think I even saw, like, by 2038, 2040, it was like $1 billion Bitcoin. And that sounds so crazy, but you forget there's two things happening. There's Bitcoin going up, the demand going up. So the linear demand going up and more people buying linearly, the cost goes up exponentially, but also the inflation of the US dollar and other currencies is so the value of that goes up compared to the currency that's already inflating. So that's why their predictions seem insanely unrealistic in the long term, because we can't predict where, a hot dog would be $148. But, if we go at this pace from the 70s and 80s, it could be, and by 2040,
Yeah.
2050. So,
I mean, are we out of, like, when you say, oh, people are predicting X for this cycle, like we potentially are out of cycles for this too. You know what I mean? Like, I know that that's the roadmap up to this point is, oh, we cycle, we hit all time high, and we
right.
build back up. I don't necessarily know if we need to look at it from a cycle perspective moving forward.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's because the demand is going to be the main driver. The cycle is just cutting the Bitcoin rewards in half, for the amount of inflation for Bitcoin in this cycle only helps matters by limiting that supply. Because at some point, as it appreciates against the dollar, more and more people are going to run there, and the more adoption it gets, it's like the law of the 100th monkey. You know, a monkey washes a banana on an island, and then all of a sudden, like, slowly other monkeys around him wash the banana, but suddenly, like, you get to a critical mass. They say it's 100 monkeys or whatever. Then on other islands, not seeing these monkeys, obviously they can't fly in a little pontoon plane or whatever to visit them. They just all of a sudden do that, almost like through the collective consciousness or the psyche. So I'm a firm believer that we've been crabbing for a couple months now. We started, it was a bear, then it was a bull the beginning of this year, and now we've been crabbing. But now, remember how we felt? Remember, like, we knew. Remember, like, was that November or December? You were like,
Yep.
"Wait, is this
Is
like,
this a bull?
are we about to be in a bull?" I'm like, I think this is the bull. Yeah, like, you never. It always creeps up on you. It's always hindsight where you realize whether you're in the bull or the bear. But I can feel it again. I think everybody can, with all the tides that are happening from politics, all the way down, and it's inevitable.
Yeah. When we log off, I'm going to go try to buy some. Like, full disclosure, that's where I'm going. Like,
Not financial advice.
case.
I'm stacking sats while we're talking. Let's see. Where is it? So 64. Oh, it's down a little. It's 64.4 again. So it's below 65. I'm just waiting for that Mount Gox. I feel like somebody in that group is going to sell and make a huge windfall. So I definitely want to be there to try and scoop some of that up. But our final story today, and what a good one to finish on. Craig Wright. This is from Craig Wright.
So awesome.
It's from his website, and Craig Wright was, part of he was a part of the OG group that, was into Bitcoin way back in the day, and helped shape how it was today. I'm probably giving him too much credit, but he's been around a long time. Well, he's gone after a lot of people and made their lives hell, because in the UK, you can, if you have a lot of money, you can basically sue them and make their lives hell, and there's nothing they could do. They have to pay for legal fees and defend themselves if you slander them. And the freedom of speech laws are not as good as they are in the U.S. and in the Netherlands and in other parts of the world. So Craig Wright was told by the judge that on his website and on I don't know if you saw on X this morning, he posted a tweet, but Craig Wright has legally stated to all of us that he is not Satoshi Nakamoto. Now he is appealing this. He is fighting it, but for now, I believe as Eric Voorhees said, Craig Wright is the only person in the world who definitively is not Satoshi Nakamoto, and the rest of us are Satoshi Nakamoto, because that's how it should be. So Craig Wright, F you for making other people's lives hell for something that you couldn't even back up. And even if you were Satoshi Nakamoto, why the hell are you going after like innocent people who are doing the news and stating their opinion on you? Can't you take it? Come on, dude. Anyway, so that was a huge high point of the week.
Yeah, that was awesome. And speaking of disclaimers, we do this show for entertainment purposes. Please don't construe anything to be true financial advice. Do your own research and have your own plan, and stick to it. Stick to your plan, and do your best out there.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody, and tell your friends. Yep. And for those in Nashville, I will be there. So I hope to see some of you there. If you are, hit me up.